Hello, everyone. Guys hear me okay? Awesome. Well, thanks for joining my session. My name's Darryl Robert, and I'm a technical marketer at Epic. Basically, I get to create really cool content using a lot of the tools that Epic Games makes. It's been super fun getting into real time. My journey kind of came, probably like a lot of y'all, through traditional 3D tools and kind of migrated over to real time about 7 or 8 years ago, and not looking back. It's where it's at for me, for sure. So I'm going to be spending a bit of time today talking about the greater ecosystem. So we're going to be covering a lot of things. So we're going to be talking about Kitbashing. We're going to be talking about Metahuman Creator, Metahuman Animator. So hopefully you all have not seen too much on that, and this will be an introduction to you so that you can get up to speed quickly. And then we're going to talk about how we can use Maya to make some characters from those metahumans have slightly different proportions. So the idea is I want to make a little tiny elf that hangs out in a treehouse that can talk. That's the end goal of what we're trying to get to today, and I'm going to be using some of those ecosystem tools to do that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is kitbashing, right? So everything that you see in here, and you guys may have seen this before, this was the launch assets for 5.3 that I put together a little while ago. And it's basically a lot of Quixel assets that have been kind of mashed together. And it's also using Electric Dreams as its foundation. So I consider a lot of the things that you get on the marketplace as part of the ecosystem, specifically our sample projects and our templates that we create. If you take those and download those, there's going to be all kinds of amazing things that you can learn from them. There's really awesome assets in there, as well as some really great setups and kind of blueprints and things like that that can help you with your work. And this scene was literally just like grab Electric Dreams, rip some stuff out of it, and then start throwing in a whole bunch of Quixel assets that I got down off of Bridge. I'm going to be using some stuff that came from Marketplace throughout this presentation also, namely some motion capture animation takes that we've taken. And that all kind of ties into the ecosystem. Ultimately, it's going to get branded as Fab. I'm sure you guys have saw Fab up there in our kiosks. All of our different marketplaces will ultimately end up being one single marketplace through Fab in the near future. I'm also going to be showing a bit of reality capture using RealityScan, the iPhone-based app, just to kind of augment some of the photogrammetry that we've gotten from the Quixel assets onto my little treehouse. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump over into Unreal. And I'll walk you through building out some of these assets and show you some of the modeling tools that you may not be aware of inside of Unreal Engine. They're really, really awesome for doing kitbashing works. They're super, super powerful and very, very fast, even when you're working with large nanite meshes, really high polygon count meshes. It does a great job. All the modeling tools do a great job with that. So here we are in 5.4. And you can see that I've got a lot of the treehouse already laid out. And like I said, if you looked at this and we just jumped over to like a nanite visualization really quick, just so you can see, it's pretty heavy, right? Like there's a lot of these dense nanite meshes. And what I've done is I've gone through and like literally every single thing in here is basically Quixel assets, except these little basic little mocked up pieces of geometry that I'm using to block out where that roof is. And I just use those modeling tools to cut parts off and smash parts together and merge things together. And I'll walk you through that process to build up the wooden roof. So the wooden roof starts off again with just something that I got off of Bridge, downloaded it from the Quixel assets. And if we jump into our content browser and go to this demo folder, I've got it kind of hanging out here in a nice, convenient location. I don't know if you guys ever use collections, but they're really great. Make a collection, you can just throw all your favorite kind of meshes and things like that, blueprints, whatever you want into those little folders. It helps you get quick access to exactly what you need when you're trying to work with Unreal. It's a good thing to do. And what we want to do is we want to just kind of get this roof sort of in the right position. And I'm just going to scale it up like, I don't know, I think it's like 3.7 is pretty close to the right size for this. And I want to position it down ever so slightly, kind of around there. And I'm not going to be too precise with this. I've already got a finished version that I can flash to if you want to see the finished version, if I can't get it dialed in exactly the way I want. And the final thing I'm going to do is just scale it this way a little bit. So it's pretty close to the shape of that roof, but you'll notice that I've already kind of hacked out a little bit of a arced slope and sway to that roof. So to do that with this really heavy mesh, we're just going to throw a lattice on there. So if we jump over to the modeling tools, And in the modeling tools, you have a whole list of different tools inside of here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into deform. We're going to go to lattice. And for this lattice, I only want it to be 2, and I think 3, and then 2 will probably get me what I want. And then I can grab these lattice points right there, kind of where that middle part of that roof is, and start to move those. Now you can see that that deformation doesn't give me the sway exactly the way I want it. So I'm going to switch the interpolation from linear to cubic, and as soon as I do that, I've now got this kind of sloping roof, and I could grab these points and maybe just use those to kind of position it exactly where I want it, and that starts to look pretty good. It looks like I maybe be a little bit low. And grab these bottom points here and just sort of give those guys a little tweak like that. So we've got something that's looking pretty good. Now, every time you're working with these tools, basically you're sort of in a live editing mode. To get those results committed, you have to click the accept button. So we're going to go ahead and do that for that piece of geometry. It's going to take just a second. It saves it back out, and I've overwritten that static mesh with that new transform in it. Pretty cool. So the next thing I want to do is I want to duplicate this and get it onto the back side of the house. So to do that, I'm going to use a mirror. So we'll just jump into Model. And then in Model, I'll just click on Mirror. And with that, I can adjust the plane of where I want that mirror to kind of execute across. And we can just hit accept one more time. So we're starting to build this up very, very quickly. And again, super high poly count nanite mesh on this scanned Quixel Megascan. So the final thing I'm going to do is just go back to deform, throw another lattice on that guy, and let's just go ahead and reset all these back to something like that, and just grab a few of these top points and just give it a little bit of drop, just a little sway. It's kind of interfering with that other piece of geometry that I didn't hide, but that's okay. And again, it's set to cubic already, so we'll just hit accept on that. So the next thing that we need to do is, if you look at the way this roof is coming here, it's basically colliding with a lot of this geometry in this front part of the house. So to get around that, I'm just going to use some of the other modeling tools, really straightforward. We're just going to do a Boolean operation on there. Now to get the piece of geometry that I want to do the Boolean with, I'm going to go ahead and go to Create. Under Create, I'm just going to grab a box and just sort of position that right around there. We'll hit accept on that, kind of scale this out, something like that. And I'm not going to be super precise on this because we have a lot to get through today. So I'm going to kind of go as fast as I possibly can. That looks pretty good. Close enough. So we'll just grab both of those guys, and we're going to do a Boolean operation. So inside a model, we'll just go ahead and click on bool, and we can specify which order we want. We want the opposite of that, and we'll just hit accept. And just like that, got a Megascan asset, got it in there, deformed it into the shape that I needed it to be, did a simple Boolean operation on. Really straightforward, really easy. Now I've already got another wooden roof up here on top of my windows. It's the same idea. I just took chunks of that roof and then carved them out, and that gives me this really fun little wooden roof. Now, that's awesome, great. Let's go ahead and add in some geometry that connects together this little top part of this treehouse, right? So, and again, the crazy thing is, all these things are really actually different scales. Like those timbers that are making up that little kind of top part of the house were actually much, much larger, but when you smash them all together, they kind of just work. I think they're really fun, these Quixel assets. I love them a lot. So we'll go back to our content browser. I'm just going to drag out another asset right here, and we'll just spin that guy around 90 degrees. That's cool. Kind of get it positioned where I want it. Maybe I'll scale it down a little bit so that it kind of sits and looks like it's sitting on the floor and kind of tucking up underneath that little house. I'm just going to hold down my Alt key and duplicate that out a few times. And then I'm just going to spin this around a little bit just to give it a little variation. And maybe I'll just take this one and, spin that guy like that and position it over here. So I could continue, to grab each one of these guys, duplicate it, spin it, rotate it, and start to build out like a nice little square wall. But I really want this to look more like a water tower that's kind of nestled into that tree, and then that little house is sitting on top of it, and then like this little, steam thing kind of comes off of the side of it. So to do that, we're going to use another one of the modeling tools. This time we're going to use something called the pattern tool. So we'll just go ahead and we'll grab all of these guys, and I'm going to bring them out here just so you can kind of see how this works. So we'll grab them all, and we'll go, favorites also are a really nice thing. I use favorites a lot, both in the details panel as well as in the modeling tools. They allow you to, kind of like that collection browser, drag stuff out and throw it in there that you use a lot. So I've got the pattern tool already dragged out into my favorites. So by default, it's set to do a line. And that's not really what we want to do. In this example, we want to do a circle. So we're going to go ahead and switch that to circle. And you can see, well, that's not exactly what I want. I don't need it filled up on the inside. So we're just going to change a few of the options on that pattern tool. So let's go ahead and switch it to, instead of using relative transform, let's turn that off, and then let's tell it to randomly pick those guys. So it's going to go through each one and kind of scatter them around. And then I can just give it, like a higher count. I could just increase the number of objects in that. And that starts to look pretty good. Maybe my radius is a little bit too big. I could scale that down a little bit like that. And then I can just hit accept. And when that's done, I can just kind of slide it back in here. And it gives me that little kind of water tower that sort of nestles into that little treehouse and holds all that stuff up. And it starts to look pretty cool. Now, I might actually have that a little bit. That's a little big. Let's just scale that guy down. Love that. OK, cool. So there we are. We've done some really quick kitbashing on the roof. We've built up a really fun little water tower that goes into that little steam thing. Let's build a different roof. Let's use PCG to help us scatter some roofing tiles around. So that first time I got a mesh that was like scan geometry of a finished roof. This time we're going to just take a single tile and we're going to use PCG to build something that looks similar, but in a procedural way. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually really straightforward inside of Unreal. So we can go ahead and delete that guy. We don't need that. And I'm going to be using this. Ooh, let's not do that. Let's just hide it. We're going to be using this piece of geometry to assist us, right? We're going to basically scatter stuff on the vertices of that piece of geometry. That's the end goal. So the first step is to create a new PCG graph. And we'll just do that kind of at the root of my, we'll just go to content and we'll just do it here because it's easier. All right, so I'm going to right click and I'll search for PCG. And we'll create a new PCG graph. And with that PCG graph in there, let's just call it something slightly different. We'll call it PCG graph roof. OK, cool. So we got that PCG graph. Let's double click on it to open it up. I'm going to shrink this down. Now, we also want to get that PCG graph into, here, let's go like this. We want to get that PCG graph into our level. So I'm just going to drag and drop it out so that it's hanging out in the level, which is kind of what we need it to do. And what we want to do is we want to first sample that mesh. And from sampling that mesh, then we're going to use a spawner, a static mesh spawner, to spit out roof tiles. There's a couple of plugins you need to turn on with PCG. Just make sure you have them both enabled, because some of the actual commands in the PCG graph network won't be there unless both of them are enabled. So just keep that in mind. Specifically, the sample mesh wouldn't be there if you didn't have both plugins in the PCG plugin directory, or like if you go into plugins and search for PCG, it's probably better just to show you guys. If you search for PCG, there's a couple of them in here. Oops, I probably did that wrong. Yeah, there they are. So they're both. You need both of these framework ones turned on for all the functionality to be there. So if we were to right-click inside of this and we want to get the mesh sampler, cool, that's great. What mesh do we want to sample? It's this guy right here, right? That's the mesh we want to sample. So we'll just click the magnifying glass to take us to that, and then we'll click the map button to bring us into that. So that's set up. Great. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take off of that mesh sampler, and we want to spawn something, right? We want to spawn another Quixel asset. So let's go ahead and pull out here, and let's just search for spawn. And we're going to do a spawn actor, or I'm sorry, a static mesh spawner. So we click on static mesh spawner, and it is basically wanting us to map into it static meshes, right? And it's set by default to a weighted, which means if you have multiple static meshes that are mapped into that guy, you can bias it more toward one or the other, and it's going to randomly distribute those out, right? Like it's kind of off the initial setup, kind of designed to give you something that you might want to do right off the bat. Now, if you wanted to do very custom randomization or be very precise on what points are going to spawn what static meshes, you have that control to build that in the graph. But off the bat, it gives you a nice random weighted value. We're just going to be using one static mesh in this instance, so no need to worry about getting too crazy with it. So on that guy, we're going to go to index 0, and index 0, we're just going to map into it a mesh, and the mesh that we want to get is down here. It's this guy. So we'll just click the arrow button to map that in, and nothing happened. Okay, you're like, oh man, what's going on? Like, why isn't my stuff there? I think it should be there. I've made the connections of two things that seem like they should work, and it is there. It's just like over here, chilling. And the reason it's over here is because this static mesh, this mesh sampler doesn't know where it's it just assumes it's at the origin, right? It doesn't know where it is in the world. So by default, that's where my roof would be. Like if I took this, well, I can just show you because it's not that hard to do. If I take that node, hopefully the undo will work. We'll see. Risky, right? I throw it there. That's when it's zeroed out. So that's where the spawnings happened. That's not where we want our stuff to be, right? So always risky doing undo in a live demo, but why not live on the edge? Cool, it worked. What we want to do is we want to get a reference to where that object is in world space, right? Like we don't want it at the origin. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually really easy. There's nodes made to kind of help us with that. And it's what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing something called get actor data, right? So that allows us to query the world and search for a tag the way I'm going to configure it, and then have that provide information upstream from that static mesh spawner. So before we get to that static mesh spawner, we're going to introduce an offset, basically, right? That's kind of what I need to do. So let's just pull this out and let's do that. There's two things that we need to do. So the first one that we need to do is we need to get this actor data. So we're just going to say get. And here's a really neat thing. When you search in Unreal, if you don't have to type the whole word out, right? Like you can just do the first two letters, space, the next two letters, space, the next two letters, so you don't have to type like big, long things out. I'm dyslexic, so anytime I don't have to type long stuff it's good. I don't want to type. I don't know how to do it. All right, so we want to get actor data, right? Cool, get actor data, awesome. What do we want to get? So we've got our actor data, and we need to tell it what are we going to filter for, right? So we want to look for all world actors, and we're going to search by tag, and the tag that we're going to search for is DTO, because I've already kind of set this up, right? Like if I go in here and I click on favorites, I didn't set this up yet. No, I didn't. So if I search for tag, which I'm going to do a lot, right? Oops, TAG. You can see there's my my tag DTO. Now, because I know I'm going to look for that a lot, I'm just going to say add that to favorites. So now, check this out. If I click this little star button, there's tag DTO sitting there. So just go through and start adding things to favorites if you know you use them all the time. It's super, super helpful to accelerate your workflow. So that mesh already has DTO on it. So this node right here is doing a thing. It's finding world actors, and we're going to leave the rest of them where they are, and we're just going to use copy points now to join these two things together. That's the next node that we need in this graph. So if I right-click and do a quick search for copy points, with copy points, we're going to just introduce that in. So we're going to go from here. We can break that and just go there. And we'll shove this in here, and just like that. Okay, what happened? Nothing happened. Actually, something did happen. Look at that. Yeah, it's a mess, right? So what's happened is on each point, I've now made a roof. So every vertice that was in that roof now has a roof tile of itself. So there's hundreds and hundreds of roofs all stacked on top of each other. I don't want to copy the point from the vertice data, which is what this is set to the components, right? I just want the single point. I want its transform, basically. So as soon as I put that to single point, now I've got roofing tiles, doing something a bit better. But they're not scaled right. They're not pretty, right? So they're totally not working right now. So we're going to add in one more node, and that's going to allow us to introduce another series of offsets before that duplication process happens, before we scatter that geometry on the roof. So again, we're going to just come over here, and we're going to search for transform points. Transform points, right. So we're going to grab this. If I hold my control key, I can just unwipe that or like do that little input and smash it over there. And we're going to put the output to that. And now they're back to where they are. And now I have a bunch of nodes that I can use to get these looking a little bit better. So we're going to do -90, -90. That kind of, oops, I didn't get minus in there, -90. That gets them going the right direction. And, you know, the scale, I need to scale these guys up. So let's just put this to like, I think the scale's set to the same. So we'll put that to 5 and 5. And then I'm going to unlock it and put this down to something like 3 and 3. And, you know, they start to look a little bit better, but there's like a weird offset thing happening, and they're not, I don't want them to go in every other like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my mesh sampler, and instead of having it do 1 point per triangle, I'm just going to have it grab the vertices, right? So that starts to look a little bit better. And I now have to use the offsets to kind of pull these out a little bit. So you can see as I start to move this offset around, let's get that up to something like 10 and 10. And instead of dialing all of these in and really trying to get precise with it, what I'm going to do is, if you right-click on one of these nodes, like say you've got something and it's got like, it's all dialed in the way you like it, and you're going to need to use that 100 times later in the project. If you right-click on a node, or a series of nodes actually, you can basically say export node to PCG settings. I've already done a transform points that has sort of the values that I want inside of there. So if I right-click and I just type, I think I called it roof. Yeah, so if I get a copy of that guy, you can see there's a new transform points with all the values the way I want them. So I'm just going to delete that and just go boink, boink, kind of join that in. And just like that, we now have a roof that looks pretty cool. Now, my moss is not doing what I want anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that guy. I don't want to grab that. I want to grab that. And I'm going to go back into my mesh tools, and I'm going to go into deform and dynamic sculpting. And let's just crank that down a little bit. Dynamic sculpting is really cool. It has the ability to, as you're sculpting, add in density. You can tessellate as you're sculpting. You can actually simplify and reduce as you're sculpting. So you can really get very, very amazing detail with the dynamic sculpt. This traditional sculpt also does cool stuff, but for this example, the dynamic sculpt actually does a bit better, more appropriate job, I should say. Not better, but just a little bit more appropriate to what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to turn that strength down and just kind of use my shift key and kind of just pull out some of that little moss there. Yeah, cool. I'll hit accept. Great. Now I haven't lost all my moss inside of my roof there. So hopefully that makes sense. Kitbashing, using the modeling tools inside of Unreal. What do you guys think? Is that cool? Anybody using the modeling tools, or is this the first time you all have seen them? Few people? They're really, really great because they're fast, right? Like if you try to do booleans on like massive data sets that would, well, they crush Maya, and they don't crush Unreal for whatever reason. We got some good algorithms in there because they're fast on heavy meshes, which is really important. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go and start talking about mesh to Metahuman. So mesh to Metahuman is super, super cool. It's actually RealityScan is the next thing I wanted to talk about. So we got to finish up with RealityScan. All right, so I have an old antique house. I've been renovating it for years. Haven't had a kitchen for 2 years. That's awful. Don't do that, especially if you have kids. I took this off the front door, so it's rights-free. It's an antique. And I used the RealityScan application on the phone to do it. So you want to start out kind of broad, and then you want to kind of get more detailed as you come in. Ultimately, you want to end up with like 70% overlap in coverage, but you can use a broad setting. After those green dots come up and you get it processed, you can set it up to Sketchfab. From Sketchfab, you can download it as a FBX or a GLTF or whatever you want. So I've already done that process. Now, keep in mind there's a few things with reality capture in RealityScan photogrammetry in general. You can't do glass, you can't do shiny surfaces. That I actually misted with a slight dulling spray because it is a metal surface, but I got it dull enough that it didn't really matter. And I've already got it in the scene here. So this sketch fab is going to get replaced with fab, right? So the marketplace, the bridge, the Quixel, Megascans, all that stuff in the near future will be consolidated down just into fab, which will be one-stop shopping for all kinds of data, which is really, really cool. So inside of Unreal, let's just go back into that guy really fast, and I've got my little, my door knock. My wife was not happy that I took it off the door, I'm not going to lie, but it's okay. Scale that dude up. Woo! Non-proportionally scale that guy up. That's not what I wanted to do. I just want to get it nice and big and rotate. Oh my gosh. Totally crazy. Totally crazy. Yeah. Door knocker. Real stuff. Actually, everything in here is real because it was all Megascans assets, but there you go. We're using the ecosystem tools to create art. Fun. All right, so let's go on and talk about Metahuman Creator. I got a little bit ahead of myself there. I thought I was going to Metahuman Creator, and I forgot about RealityScan. Sorry, guys. Metahuman is awesome. And like I said, the end goal is we want a little elf, right? We want non-human proportions on the head. I want non-human proportions on the body. And I'm going to be showing you a simplified way of doing this. There are more advanced ways using DNA, and I think there was a really great Unreal Fest DNA class from New Orleans. If you guys want to do more advanced stuff with like massively changed geometry shapes for the face, check that one out. But for what we're doing, it's just this little elf guy, right? So he started off, actually I modeled the little guy up in Maya. It was a really simple loose shape. And you create a metahuman identity. So the first step is to import in that mesh after you create the metahuman identity in the content browser. So search out for elf. And this video is going to be sped up because there is some processing here. Most of it happens on your local machine. There is a phone home that happens for one step of the process. But in general, it's pretty fast. This is only sped up in areas like 200x. So what you want to do is you want to get your camera field of view down to something. It starts by 20, or 20 is a more ideal solution for that, right? The algorithm has a better way of solving. The next thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and promote the first frame to be your capture frame. But you want to get that camera up, looking up. Even whenever you're using the metahuman tools, you always want to be kind of looking up underneath the face because it's measuring sort of from here back to the ears up through the nose. So it's really important to get the camera kind of up in the right position. So after you've done that, you're basically going to go through and promote the frames, and then you need to start adding in details. Like the default marker set is what you want to get defined first, right? So it's really pretty straightforward. It locks the camera, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that the inside eye and all these curves are kind of set up where they need to be. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just grab a few of the points and sort of move them around. You can grab straight curves or individual points. There's a bunch of hotkeys associated with this so that you can use it to not select curves or not select points. But I just need to give these slight little tweaks to try to get that a little bit better. And the end result is it's going to be really pretty solid when we're done. So you can grab kind of the corners and just get everything looking, like the auto alignment of it. It does a fair job, but there's always going to be a process of kind of, grabbing some of these points. You can delete points, you can add points. It's pretty straightforward. So with that done, hopefully I should have sped that video up more. I'm talking very fast. Sorry for non-native English speakers. The New York in me is real. It comes out. I talk fast. Apologize for that. But this will be on the internet when it's done, so if you want to, you can slow me down and really try to understand what I'm saying. All right, cool. So here comes the next step, and I'm just going to speed through this so we're going to run the metahuman identity solve. So it's going to go through, and this is where it's going to process. When we run the metahuman identity solve, this is where it's going to go through, and it's going to create the mesh. And you can see it did a pretty good job of matching that mesh. So as I scrub through with my A/B slider, you can see, yeah, they really do look pretty good. There's a bunch of different view modes, right? So you can view side by side. You can do this kind of cross wipe. And what we need to do is we need to add in detail for those ears. You can see on the side by side that it hasn't captured those ears. So you always want to run the metahuman identity solve with the default set first. Don't add the ears first. You always want to get that baseline done first. and then add in extra curves. And you can see on the right-hand side right here, there's lots of different extra curves you can add in to get a more refined model. But it works pretty well right off the bat without doing any of the extra curves, except for this example, the ear. So again, I'm turning off the curve so that it's easier for me to select those points. I'm going to kind of run through here and just line those points up. And then after that's done, what you're going to do is we're going to run the solve again. And now as I wipe through that, you can see that it looks pretty good. So the next thing is you need to specify what type of body it's going to be. Like you have small, medium, and large, male and female. So you give it, you define the body, and then from there you can send it off to do either a simplified version, which is just a skeleton mesh only, or the auto rig identity with the skeleton mesh and the full Metahuman. And that's going to allow you to then go into Metahuman Creator and start to add in more control or more modifications to it in Metahuman Creator, which is the web-based app for creating Metahumans. So you basically, in this example, send it off to Metahuman Creator. It processes. It says, OK, cool, you now have a Metahuman with DNA. Wonderful. And off it goes. So the next step is to jump into Metahuman Creator. And in Metahuman Creator, the process is pretty straightforward. It comes in by default as a Metahuman mesh, right? It doesn't have any of the texturing or anything like that done right away. And it's going to give you a preview of this range of motion test of the animation here. So it looks pretty good, but there's some areas that still need some refinement. You can see the eyes kind of passing through right there. So what I want to do is I want to go through and kind of go into our face, and on the eyes, I'm going to drop down the region of influence just a little bit so that it takes more of that base Metahuman and gets deviated away a little bit from my mesh to Metahuman that kind of had that interpenetration happening. So just by pulling down that slider a little bit, it does a good job. And I also pull the mouth down a little bit just because I want to have a little bit more of that original Metahuman. Then you can go through and start adding on your textures, changing your eyes. If you wanted to mix this in with another Metahuman, you wanted to get the cheeks of another Metahuman or a jawline of another Metahuman, you'd have that control. So all the things that you can do with Metahuman Creator can now be layered on top of that custom mesh that, again, I modeled in Maya, right? So it just started off as a simple base mesh in Maya. I'm going through and adding in some cool hair. This was actually done in an older version. This was a Metahuman 2.0 Metahuman when I originally did this recording. I have updated to a Metahuman 3.0 because to run the Metahumans in 5.4, you have to have a Metahuman 3.0. So just keep that in mind. If you have legacy Metahumans, you will have to roll them up to take advantage of the new Metahuman spec. They have bones in the ears now. That's like one of the main changes between the Metahuman 2s and the Metahuman 3s. So that's my little elf dude. I think he looks cool. He's weird, and weird is good. So with that done, you're basically, ready to go. So what I want to do on my Metahuman is, like I said, I want a little elf, right? So I want a short elf with a big head. So I'm going to export out the short elf with the big head, but I also exported out the full upper body that was like the larger upper body, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into Maya, and inside of Maya, I'm going to mix and match the two different body types of the elf, as well as make some slight changes to it. And I'll talk to you guys about some of the things that you need to be aware of when you're working with these guys. All right, so now that we've got our Metahuman, the next thing that we want to do is we want to also process the information for the facial animation, right? So with the facial animation, there's two ways of approaching it. You can use an iPhone, or you can use a more complicated camera rig, like a dual stereo camera rig. And they both work well. The dual camera rig or the stereo rig is a little bit higher fidelity. It's going to capture a better look. There are best practices for both. You're going to want to have good lighting in both, and I'll kind of talk you through some of those as we jump through this. So with the stereo camera, after you've done your recording with the stereo camera, you're provided with a bunch of audio files and movie files for the two cameras. And what we need to do is we need to take those and we need to process the data before it even gets to Unreal. So that's the two cameras. They're stereo cameras, but it's one up and one lower.
Welcome to my Unreal treehouse.
This is my guy.
Perfect place for Metahumans
or the audio and the animation that we want to capture.
And enjoy the tranquility of nature.
I love this guy's voice. He's totally, totally cool. So we've got that. And there's also a camera calibration that you have to run. So this is just a simple little, for both cameras, there's a calibration that you run. And then there's an identity that you need to do. And for the identity, it's kind of the same thing where you need to show the face without the teeth and then show the face with the teeth. So after you've got those raw things in your plugins directory, right? Like I'll just pause this right here. Now you can see, like I said, I did this in 5.2, but it's the same idea. In the plugins directory, there's stereo camera tools and a calibration app, and we're going to use those to batch process the data. So in the README, it basically says, that you got to provide the path to the Python script, and then you got to tell it where the top camera is and where the bottom camera is. So I've got a little text file that I put together, and the first line of it is using the ingest Python tool, and we're going to run it on the calibration file. So we need to get that calibration file figured out first, right? And then the second line basically goes through and sets up the identity for it. And then after the identity's been set up, you run those batch scripts, and it creates the files for you, right? So once you get those files created, then you're ready to essentially go into Unreal, and inside of Unreal, you need to tell it that you want to have a stereo camera setup. So you're creating another Metahuman identity, basically. Like that's ultimately what you need to do, but before you can get there, you have to process that data, right? And once that data's been processed, then you can convert it into a Metahuman and capture the performance. So it's going to go through here. We're going to create that capture source. And then we're going to jump into the Metahuman identity. And with the Metahuman identity, and this time instead of selecting a mesh, what we're going to do is we're going to select that processed data that we just made with that little bat file that basically went through and pre-processed all the data. And then we turn that processed data into something that Unreal can use. So we're going to go ahead and grab the identity. So here he comes in. And kind of like the first time that we did mesh to Metahuman, it's the same process, right? You need to grab the neutral frame and you need to grab a teeth frame. Like those are the two things that you're trying to do to capture and create a mesh from this that then ultimately becomes the performance file. So we're going to kind of go through. We're going to promote frame 40. With frame 40 promoted, it's going to give us lines like we just saw in the mesh of Metahuman. It's the same exact workflow, right? You want to make sure that those line up. In this example, they do a pretty good job. So we can kind of just scrub through that. I'm just going to move through this a little bit faster here because I want to show you all the cool animation in Unreal once we get through it. So it goes through and you do the identity solve. After you do the identity solve, you can see as we scrub through this, it looks pretty good, and that's the depth map, which you can see there, which is pretty high quality, right? Now, there's little holes and things like that. It filters that out. Like it doesn't matter that there's a little bit of noise. And I'm rotating the light in there just so you can see that it's actually 3D data that's inside of that guy. So after you go and create that, the next thing you want to do is, again, select the body like we did the first time. And then we want to go ahead and specify, after you create a rig, you'll see that once we turn this into a Metahuman, we're then going to have the ability, after it's created the DNA file and done all the processing for it, to add in another pose for the teeth, so a teeth pose. And that's going to be kind of the same idea where you need to use some curves to identify where the lips are as well as where a few of the teeth are. And there's, again, like if you expanded these tabs out, you could add in more curves to get a better solve. But just the stuff that's like by generic setup in it is actually really pretty solid and pretty good. So after you do that, it's the same idea where you can then toggle between the different shapes and use the scrub tools to kind of scrub through them. So we've got a character now ready to go. A Metahuman now is a base version of that character for the performance has been created from that data that we calibrated. So it's kind of boring and long, and I'm sorry, but now you guys have the full understanding of how to create a Metahuman from a stereo camera. So let's just jump forward to the next slide and talk about the performance. So here we are, and we're going to create a Metahuman performance, right? So you right-click, search for Metahuman, say performance. We just need to hook everything up, so it's going to kind of come through. It's going to ask, what file do you want to use for this performance? So we're going to we want to use I only processed the one where he's talking about the treehouse. So that's our treehouse file. And you need to specify where the audio is going to be. Now, by default, the audio is going to be offset. So instead of doing relative, I'm just going to switch it to none. And that's going to basically zero the audio file back out so that they're in sync. There wasn't time code provided with this, right? So that's why that's kind of happening.
Hello there. Welcome to my Unreal treehouse. This is the perfect place for metahumans to...
All right, so what we want to do is we want to basically process all that. So you just right-click on it. It does, and I've accelerated this a fair bit. It does the first pass it goes through, don't freak out if it doesn't look perfect, because the second pass it really refines itself.
This is the perfect place for metahumans to unwind, disconnect, and enjoy the tranquility of nature.
Woohoo! All right, cool. So we have a performance. You can save that out. And once you have that performance saved, it can be applied to any metahuman, right? It does. So we're going to use that performance on our little elf. Now, before we get there, I'm just going to quickly run through the slide about how to use an iPhone. So in the iPhone, you can use it as a live link. That's not going to be using the same sophistication as Metahuman Animator. What we want to do is we want to do the one where we have to process the data. So it's not a real-time capture. You have to process the data. So we're going to use Metahuman Animator to do that. So same idea, right, as when we were doing, and I was really tired when I made this, so I hadn't slept in like days. You want to have your camera looking up, and I'm turning the depth preview on here. You want to have a little bit of gray value in there that lets you know how close to that camera you're supposed to be. So it's always good to sort of turn that depth preview on just for a second to make sure you're framed right. You want the camera a little bit lower. iPhone 12 has the best sensor. Apple, as they went forward, saved some costs with the sensor. So actually an iPhone 12 or an iPhone 12 mini are the best cameras to use if you're doing mesh to metahuman. So after you've done that, you basically have to, instead of showing your teeth like we did with the stereo camera, on this example for the phone, you show the forward face, then you look to the left, and then you look to the right. So those are going to be used as the frames that are going to identify to create the metahuman identity. So kind of the same idea before, create a new metahuman identity. In that capture source, instead of setting it to be a stereo camera, we're going to tell it that we're going to use the live link connect, and I'm just going to pipe in the IP address, right? Now, instead of capturing the data live, I'm going to actually bring in the folder that was archived on the iPhone. So you can kind of search it out, grab that stuff, and you need to basically go through that same stereo process of processing the data, right? So that turns the data into something that Unreal can use, which we kind of glossed over really quickly when we were talking about the stereo cam, but I have a lot to talk about, so I didn't want to spend too much time on it. Same idea. You got to set up some points. You promote the frame, and I'm going to scrub through this just because we want to get through this a little bit faster. You promote the frame. So you promote front, left, right, center, and then there's your mesh to metahuman, and you can see the depth isn't quite, and then the teeth pose. You go through and do that. And then you can process performances with it, which is really similar to what we saw before. And I have a side-by-side right here, so you can see
Welcome to my Unreal
the fidelity
treehouse.
that the stereo camera has over the iPhone camera. It really is a much higher fidelity capture you're going to get than using the iPhone camera, right? So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and talk about Maya. And inside of Maya, what I've got here is I've got the tall guy, the really skinny guy, and the short or the mid-frame guy. And what I've done is I want to get the shorter legs with the bigger upper body. And you'll notice that when you bring in the FBX file from Unreal into Maya, the edges are, there's seams that are unstuck here. So you can see, let's get back here, that those seams aren't connected. So what you need to do is you need to grab all the vertices, merge them together. After you merge the vertices together, you're going to want to smooth the edges. So I'm going to do a merge on them, and then I'm going to do a smooth on them, and that fixes all of the seams, right? So that's going to happen to you every time you bring a metahuman into Maya. And you'll also notice that across the seam here from the head mesh, which is a separate mesh from the body mesh, it's also going to have a problem. So we're going to grab those edges using a selection border, and then we're going to just do a simple average across those to fix that seam. And then when that's done, I've got a blend shape that's set up that lets me kind of morph between those two guys to get the skinny legs on the bottom. So really straightforward setup inside of Maya. And then I'm just going to offset some of these joints to kind of give them a broader shoulder and a bigger chest. So that's how I'm getting to my stylized character. So you save that out as an FBX file, and we're going to jump into Unreal and kind of walk you through the process of what it's like to bring that stuff in hyper fast in like 5 minutes, because we're running out of time quick. All right, so here we are. And let's go ahead and jump over to metahumans. So we've got our metahuman cloth, right? We've got this guy right here. And he's cool. He's like Wes Anderson elf in his little sweater and his shorts. I think it's funny. It makes me laugh. So what we want to do is we want to import into this that FBX file that we just prepped in Maya that has slightly different proportions. So if I right-click and say import, and I'm going to grab this FBX file right here. When I'm doing the import, I'm going to tell it that I want, you have to make sure that animation's turned on inside of Maya to get that blend shape to come across, right? So animation was turned on. I'm going to use the Metahuman skeleton as its base. Very important to do that. And I've got my T-pose set to 0, and I've got morph targets turned on. And if we just say import all, it's going to go under new parent and create new materials. That's fine for this example. So here's our new skeleton, right? So you can see that he's got these really cool proportions, right? He's got this much larger body on the upper top, and he's got this blend morph that lets you make his legs skinny. So we've got a non-humanoid shaped elf. Yay, just what we need. So there's a few things that you need to do, though, because by default, the Metahuman skeleton has a bunch of corrective shapes on top of it. It has an anim blueprint that does pose-based corrects on all over the limbs and things like that. So we want to make sure that we capture that. So all you have to do is kind of come down here and go to skeleton mesh. And in skeleton mesh, tell it to grab that anim blueprint. So if we click on the edit button, you can see, those are all the corrective shapes. So there's all these pose drivers that are doing things to make the joints look good where they flex. So you got to hook that up, and that's cool. So with that done, we can save this out, and let's go ahead and jump to our content browser. I'm going to take this elf, and I'm going to duplicate the blueprint because I want to make a version of this that's like, I don't know, we'll call it demo. I'm cooking. I've got 2.5 minutes to finish this. So with our demo, elf, let's go double-click on that guy. Make sure I got the right one up here. I do. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to body, and then for body, we're going to put this body into it right here that we just brought in, right? Cool. So now if we look in our viewport, we've got that guy. He's going to have that body. We can hit compile and save on it. Now, I also want that blend shape to kind of come across, right? So there is this blend shape. If we go back into this guy, I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to say copy name. So I want to get that blend shape hooked up so that it's going to drive this. And it's really easy to do. In the event graph, what we're going to do is we're going to drag off this so that it executes, and we're just going to say set morph, target body, right? And then we got to give it the name that we just copied. So I'm going to paste that in there. We're going to set that value to 1. Woohoo! And with that done, oops, I don't need to do that, my bad. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a custom event that's going to also tie into the construction script. So we'll just type custom, and we'll add a custom event, and we'll just call this like skin, and we'll do that. So it's going to trigger it, and we're going to go back to the construction script, and off of the construction script, the final thing we just want to say is we'll add in that function to call it. So now if we hit compile and save, that should be hooked up. And one other thing that I did do is I actually hooked up the sword. I've got some motion capture in here of this elf doing crazy stuff with a big sword. So I'm going to drag the done version out because I've only got a minute to show you how to hook up the animation on the face. Oops, my bad. And let's just grab the guy out that's already got the sword hooked up. It's just a socket. It's just you drag the other skeleton in and add it into a socket. I think cloth skinny. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's grab this guy. Let's put him right here on this piece of wood. And I'm going to grab this out and just give him a little area to work. Okay, so there's our elf. Now, I only did this for the LOD0, so what I'm going to do is on this guy right here, I'm just going to kind of scroll down here and just tell it to not try to use a bunch of LUDs because we're going to be close up on him. We'll just put that to 1. So there's our little elf with his skinny little legs, you can see. And if we went back here and went to, this guy, you can see that, he's all hooked up and he's ready to go. So let's drag him into a sequence. Let's get out of the modeling tools and go into sequence. Let's bring up this sequencer right here. Let's drag our elf into our scene. And because we hooked the control rig up, we don't need that guy. We don't want the face control rig because we're going to just use the animation of our take here. So let's just scrub through this, and there's his little animation happening. I need to get the audio, which I have conveniently located in my browser. So let's just drag and drop that in there. I think I might need to get a little more space. Boink. All right, line that up.
Oh, hello. Welcome.
Okay, cool. Now let's go to the body and add an animation. Now I've already got a few clips inside of here. Let's just grab the swing around clip. Woohoo! And then it's ridiculous, but you know, why not be ridiculous when you can? Let's add another clip in. I used the new animation retargeting, single click to do the retargeting, which is super, super cool. So when it says I'm a minute over, does that mean I'm a minute over into Q&A or I'm a minute over into like 50 minutes? Okay. Because I'll show you guys more. I could do this all day long. All day long. Oh, I thought I was, see, my bad. I thought I was out of time, 10 minutes. Well, heck, I'll show you how to do some more stuff then. Anyway, let's do the idle pose after this. Idle on shoulders. All right, so we've got our two. We're missing one right there. Okay, you guys ready for this? Skinny elf, big upper body, crazy giant sword, and here, let's make it even better. Let's go to a camera with some depth of field on it. Ooh, outliner. Let's get rid of you. We don't need that stuff. Select cam. I'm going to grab camera 0 and just dial in that focal plane here. Let's see here. If we say show focus plane. Cool. All right. He's so stupid. Look at him. Okay.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to my Unreal treehouse. This is the perfect place for metahumans to unwind, disconnect, and enjoy the tranquility of nature. Oh, hello there.
We have an elf.
Welcome to my Unreal treehouse. This is the perfect place.
He's ready for his leading role in a
disconnect,
Wes Anderson movie.
Enjoy
He's
the
ready to do it.
tranquility of nature.
All right, so I talked about motion capture really fast. Since we have, or we can do Q&A, or I can do Q&A afterwards outside. I do want to show you the new retargeting stuff because it's just really slick. It's in 5.4. Prior, you would have to do a little bit of setup to get the MetaHuman to take retargeting data from an old school like UE4. I'm sorry. Prior to 5.4, you would have to use, there'd be a bit more setup involved to take a UE4 mannequin onto a MetaHuman, but now it's just a single click to do it. So let me walk you through the process because it is pretty cool. And I apologize I was going so fast. I was trying to get through everything. And I always have more than I should when it comes to these demos because, I don't know, that's the way I do it. Yeah, so let's grab an attack one, right? So let's see what this guy's doing, right? Oh, yeah, wait, where'd he go? Oh, my gosh. Okay, let's not do that. That's too crazy. Actually, you know what? Let's do that. He'll jump off the treehouse. Yeah, okay, cool. So we want to retarget that. How do you do it? You right-click on it and you say, retarget animations. And then the retargeter comes up and it's like really smart. So you can say, well, what do I want to go to? I want to go to this guy. And then which one do I want to do? It's like slam down or... Yeah, okay, look, I retargeted onto a MetaHuman. So we could, if we don't like what the and it knows a bunch of different types of skeletons off the bat, right? Like it knows like a whole whack of skeletons have been already predefined. If you don't like the way the retargeter chains have been set up or you wanted to modify them, tweak them, or make them different, you could export the retargeting assets. For this example, we're just going to export out the animation and we'll give it like a prefix of MH, then underscore, and we'll send it right to the content root folder and we'll say export and yay. Cool. So he can swing his sword. Then after that, sword swinging, we're not going to go to an idle pose. We're going to jump off. We're going to jump off. MH. Attack. Wait, where is it? Oh, there it is. Drop down. Boink. I don't know if these clips are going to line up, but hopefully they do.
perfect place.
Yeah, all right. That's so silly. Okay, cool. Let's turn off that just so we can get a better view. Okay, here we go.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to my Unreal Treehouse. This is the perfect place for metahumans to unwind, disconnect, and enjoy the
Oh,
hello there.
That's so funny. Hold on.
Welcome to my Unreal Treehouse.
So you can spend all day
This is the
playing with
perfect
this
place
stuff.
for metahumans
Oh
to
yeah, he
unwind,
lands on a mushroom.
disconnect, and enjoy the Oh, hello there.
All right.
Welcome to my Unreal
So
Treehouse.
to recap,
This is the perfect place for
the
metahumans to
ecosystem
unwind,
tools are really cool.
disconnect,
We
and
used
enjoy the
RealityScan to create some
hello
custom
there.
assets. We used a whole bunch of
Welcome to
Quixel
my
assets to
Unreal
kitbash
Treehouse.
together some of the
This
modeling
is the
tools
perfect
inside of
place for
Unreal.
metahumans to
We
unwind,
talked about how we can
disconnect,
modify things
and
to make the
enjoy the
metahumans work well with Maya to
hello
fix some
there.
of the little edge
Welcome to
issues
my
and
Unreal
kind of
Treehouse.
normal issues across
This
the
is the
edges.
perfect place for
How to hook
metahumans
the
to
characters
unwind,
up with motion
disconnect,
capture, get
and
all this
enjoy
stuff
the
working.
Oh,
The final thing that I should be doing is sending this
Welcome
off
to my
to
Unreal
ArtStation to share with
Treehouse.
all my friends, my
This is the
ridiculous little
perfect
elf. So
place for
that would be the
metahumans
final
to
step in the
unwind,
Epic ecosystem.
disconnect,
Thanks for your time.
and
I
enjoy the
appreciate you guys
Oh,
hanging out with
hello
us
there.
today. And
Welcome to
if you have
my
any
Unreal
questions,
Treehouse.
I'm here to do my best to answer them. Thanks again, everyone.